Welcome to the Justin Strawn Podcast. I am your host, Justin Strawn. Glad to be back with you for another episode to talk everything Mississippi State, everything possibly pro sports. Probably going to be jumping into a little bit of Grizzly talk today because that's what my son requested. So I'll probably try to appease him for a little bit on this episode. Also, going to be talking a little bit of TV stuff. Got, say, Buffy rewatch going currently that I've been doing, and I want to kind of chime in on it here on the podcast. And I'll probably talk about some things here locally in the DeSoto County area that they've been talked about, debated, on all kinds of other words. Let's just go ahead and be honest. I mean, it's been quite a firestorm here with a local issue that's been going on. So we'll discuss all that here on the podcast today. Some things I did not mention in the first episode that I want to mention here in the second episode. I am putting clips of the podcast on YouTube. I'm putting them on TikTok, on Instagram, Facebook, all the whole 9 yards. And I got a lot of really good interaction, got a lot of good feedback on YouTube, on TikTok especially, but I got quite a bit on YouTube as well. So if you're interested in, if you're on TikTok, if you're on YouTube, or if you're on any of those other social media platforms, check me out there. I am on Twitter if you are new to me. I've been on Twitter since 2013 discussing Mississippi State sports on there. So you can catch me at Justin M. Strawn, and you can catch me on, I'm pretty sure, on TikTok and YouTube at the same handle as well. So, but if you type in Justin Strawn, you should be able to find it. So, all right, let's go ahead and get into the heart of the show. As always, if you are here for just certain parts of this, you can check the show notes and you can find whatever it is that you're looking for, whatever content that it is that you want to find. You can find that there in the show notes, and you can just skip right ahead to it. So, all right, like I said, let's go ahead and get into the heart of the show today. We'll start with Mississippi State like I typically will always do. So let's go ahead and get into that. Mississippi State has a huge football game coming up. They've only got 2 left. They've got the Missouri Tigers this weekend. Then they have an off week, and then they finish up the season with the Egg Bowl on the Friday after Thanksgiving. This is a big one because this is probably the much easier of the last 2 games that Mississippi State can win. If you look at Missouri and you look at Ole Miss, obviously Missouri is not having as good of a year as Ole Miss, and a lot of it is just bad luck for Missouri. They probably could be having just as strong of a year as Ole Miss is if it wasn't for the fact that their quarterback, Pribula, I think is his name, Pribula? Yeah, Pribula, if he had not gone down with an injury in the Vanderbilt game, and they have not really been able to recover ever since. And when we get into just a little bit of a statistical breakdown, you'll see just how vast the difference it has been ever since he has gone down. Missouri is reeling a little bit at this point. They have lost 3 of their last 4. Mississippi State obviously is too. They have lost 5 of their last 6. So neither team is playing at their best right now. The difference, I think, and why I think that this might end up favoring State, even though they are a 6.5-point underdog last time I checked, Mississippi State is coming into this game with possibly playing their better quarterback, whereas Missouri is being forced to play their worst quarterback. And we obviously got to get into this. I talked about it some on the podcast on Monday when I recorded on Monday. Mississippi State is just a better team, and they just have a better chance to win when they are going to have Kamario Taylor in at quarterback. And you know, that was one of the things that we were wanting to find out on Monday when Jeff Lebby had his press conference. You know, is he giving any kind of an idea about what the health of Blake Shapen is? Is he giving any idea of just how likely it is that Shapen's going to be the starter, or if Kamario Taylor is going to be the starting quarterback? And this is the stuff that just drives me crazy that coaches do, because Jeff Lebby said if Blake Shapen is totally healthy, he will be the starter. He will be the guy at quarterback, but he's got to be totally healthy. Now, if you listen to anybody else, if you listen to Ryan and Robbie on the Thunder and Lightning podcast, if you read any of the articles that are out there for people that cover the team, most people are saying it sounds like he's not going to be completely healthy. Now, we don't know what his injury is. We haven't gotten an injury report that will come out. Those either come out on Wednesday or Thursday night. I don't remember when those come out, but we're still waiting to see that. But it just drives me crazy that coaches do this. Like, they decide who their starter is, and once they make that decision, getting them to come off of it is almost an impossible task for them to do so. And look, Jeff Lebby is not the first coach to do this, to say, hey, he's my starter, he's my guy, I'm going to go with it. If you guys remember back in 2012, when Ladarius Perkins took over the start, 2013, when Ladarius Perkins was the starting running back for the Bulldogs, he was averaging about 4 yards a carry. He just really wasn't built for the Dan Mullen offense, but he was getting by far the lion's share of all the carries. And whenever they put in Josh Robinson in 2013, he was averaging like 5.5 yards a carry. And it was obvious who the more effective and who the better running back was and who made that offense better. But regardless of that, Dan Mullen kept running Ladarius Perkins out there. Now, you could have at least made the argument back then that Ladarius Perkins brought a receiving option to the running game that Josh Robinson just did not offer at the time. But they didn't utilize that part of the passing game that much. So it was just really crazy and really frustrating to sit there and watch Ladarius Perkins get eaten up time after time after time. Again, I don't remember in 2015, they had a tiny little running back that they had converted from wide receiver because he couldn't catch, but he was incredibly fast. I think his name was Brandon something. I don't remember, but they kept running him up the middle like he was a 225-pound back. And that's not what he was. He was like 160 pounds, and he got tripped up every single time. If he were able to find a hole, he could break one off, but that's not the way that running game was set up back in 2015. And it was just maddening to watch him just continue to run this tiny little back straight up the middle every single time. And that's what they did. And the 2015 running game was not very successful. The only person who had any success running the football was our quarterback, Dak Prescott. So, like I said, it's frustrating to watch coaches do this. And, I just wonder, like, are coaches just geniuses and everybody else just really dumb? Because I have not found a single person who would be willing to say the offense is currently better and the team plays better when it has Blake Shapen at quarterback than when Kamario Taylor is out there. I've heard people say that Kamario Taylor really probably isn't ready for what needs to be asked of him, and I can understand that, I can agree with it, but it's still, when you look at these past two games, the Arkansas game and the Georgia game, and you see what Blake Shapen was doing in those games, and you see what he did in every other game as well, and you saw just in those moments what Kamario Taylor was doing, it's obvious how the team thrives so much more when Kamario Taylor is there. And regardless of that, Jeff Lebby is still saying if Blake Shapen is completely healthy, he's going to be the starter. Now, like I said, I don't know if it doesn't sound like he's going to be completely healthy. Will he be completely healthy by the Egg Bowl? I don't know. But if he is, because he'll have an extra week to heal up, and we don't know what his injury is. All we heard after the game was it was an upper body injury. But if he is going to be healthy at that time, they're going to run Blake Shapen out there, and I just don't know that it will work well. Now, Ole Miss doesn't have a very good defense, so that might help them when they go into that game. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the Egg Bowl week. But for this week and for now, it's really, really frustrating to hear Jeff Lebby continue to say Blake Shapen is going to be our quarterback as long as he is healthy. And like I said, I wish I could understand what it is that he sees when Blake Shapen is out there and why he thinks that's the best decision. Because it just drives me crazy to hear coaches say stuff like this when everybody else who is watching the game is getting a completely different takeaway. I know that they make millions of dollars and that they should be the experts and they should know better, but like I said, I just don't understand it. And I cannot wrap my mind around why coaches do this and why they just continue to put worse players out there and put their teams in worse positions because they just have in their head that this one guy is going to make the team better. when all the evidence is pointing towards that not being the case. Like I said, it just absolutely drives me crazy, and I don't know why they do that. It just is maddening to sit there and listen to coaches do that, and I wish I had an explanation for it. I really do. I just wish he could point to something and tell us why he thinks Blake Shapen is the better option for Mississippi State if he is healthy. And I have not heard him do that. I've not seen anything that shows him saying why he thinks that. So if you have seen anything, please send it to me. Hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on TikTok, YouTube, wherever, and let me know what he is pointing to that says State's in a better position with Blake Shapen in quarter, because I just don't get it at this point. But let's talk about the actual game. So, look, prediction wise, here's what I think. If Kamario Taylor plays, I think State wins, because I think the offense will have enough juice behind it and they'll be able to score enough points and that they will win. If Blake Shapen plays, this Missouri Tiger defense is really good. They get after the quarterback. They've got one player. What's his name? His name is. I can't find it right now. Damian Wilson II is the leading. Leads the team in sacks. I'm sorry, no, he's not. That's Zion Young that leads the team in sacks. He's got 11. You've got two other players. You've got Khalil Jacobs with 5, and you've got Damian Wilson II. He's got 6. Zion Young was supposed to be on Georgia's team, I do believe, this year, but this is the NIL era, and he ended up transferring off Georgia and went to Missouri. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it's Zion Young that was that one. So, look, 11 sacks. I mean, if Blake Shapen is back there, he's probably going to get 3 or 4 just himself with the way that this offensive line plays. That's just all there is to it. Look, Kamario Taylor could very easily get sacked as well in this game, but I do think it was interesting that once Kamario Taylor came in the game in the second half of the Georgia game, there were no more sacks. And because he made things happen with his feet, which Blake Shapen just can't. I talked about that on Monday. When the pocket collapses around Blake Shapen, he gets sacked. It's just going to happen. He's somewhat mobile in the fact that he can move around in the pocket, but he's just not mobile enough to make it happen. He's mobile enough that where a design quarterback run can actually be productive and he can actually make something happen with that. But that's about the only way that he can do things. And then he ended up fumbling that one play where he had I'm not sure if that was a design quarterback run or if that was one of the few times that he escaped the pocket. But it typically, if the pocket collapses, it typically does not work out for Blake Shapen or for Mississippi State. And with this Missouri defense, it could get real bad real quick if Blake Shapen is back there, because the pocket is going to collapse. I talked about this on Monday. I think the offensive line plays better with Kamario Taylor in there because they know they have a margin for error with Kamario Taylor back there. If they don't block up their man completely, and if they don't completely lock him up, then they know that Kamario Taylor does have that escapability where he can get out of the pocket and he can make something happen with his feet. And they know that if Blake Shapen is back there, if they screw up, he's going down. And so they play much tighter. They don't play nearly as loose. And it just makes a huge difference in the way they play. So, like I said, if Shapen plays, he's probably going to get sacked 8, 9, 10 times in this game. And he's probably going to have 1 or 2 fumbles because he's going to get hit. He's going to get blindsided and he's going to lose the football. And that's just part of what it is when you're giving up sack after sack after sack. Eventually, 1 or 2 of those sacks is going to result in a fumble, and you're going to lose the football. So, like I said, I think that when it just boils down to that's what it's going to be. If Kamario Taylor plays, they win. They may not win, but I think they have a much better chance to win. But I really do believe he will provide enough spark offensively to give the Bulldogs win, because unfortunately for Missouri, they just can't score right now. Now, they do have a great running back in Ahmad Hardy. He's been fantastic. He averages over 6 yards a carry, averaging almost 120 yards a game. He's got 12 touchdowns, and he is the rock of this Missouri offense right now. And that has to worry you a little bit, because one of the biggest problems that Mississippi State has as a defense is they don't stop the run at all. So they're really going to have to, I think what you're going to have to do on Saturday, you're going to have to load that box up and just say, you know what, we want your backup quarterback, the guy that you weren't planning on being your primary starter. We want you to be. We're going to make him beat us, and if he can, kudos to him. But if he can't, then it's going to be all up to Ahmad Hardy, because Bo Pribula, he ended up having. He was completing 70% of his passes, had 11 touchdowns, averaging 210 yards a game before he goes down with an injury in the Vanderbilt game. And their backup, Matt Zollers, is has a 53% passing completion percentage with only 2 touchdowns and only averaging 48 yards a game. And that's with a full game as a starter this past week against Texas A&M, because the previous week was their previous game was against Vanderbilt, and I think Pribula went out in the second quarter, if I'm not mistaken. So, look, you can win this game. You can. You can win it with Chapin too, if your defense is up to the task of slowing down Ahmad Hardy, and you can keep their backup quarterback Zollers from coming in and having a good game. You can beat them with Chapin too, but I just don't have near as much confidence that they will be able to do so. And like I said, Missouri's a really good team. They would be a playoff contending team if it weren't for the fact that they lost their quarterback, and it just is what it is. So I'll be very interested to see what Missouri's does in this game. They're coming into it with having their playoff hopes dashed, because they've already lost 3 games. They've lost 3 of their last 4. They're not getting into the playoff at this point. We had 3 loss SEC teams last year. None of them made it. Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. None of them made it with 3 losses. I can't see a Missouri team, even if they were to beat Mississippi State. I don't know who they play at the end of the year. Even if they, maybe Arkansas, but even if they win that game, like I said, I can't see them getting back into the playoff conversation. So, what they were playing for has been evaporated, and it really sucks when it's injuries that takes that away from you, but it is what it is, and you just kind of have to go on with it and just make the best of it. So, like I said, we'll see what they do this week, and we'll see if Mississippi State can pull this upset off, because I really think if Kamari Taylor plays, I think they win. I think it comes down to that. So, all right, let's talk about the basketball team. They had their first real challenge of the year on Monday night against Iowa State, and it did not go well. This was concerning, guys. It was really concerning. I will say this: I think this team will eventually be okay, but I think there's going to be some growing pains. One of the things that is killing this team right now for the men's basketball team is Chris Jans doesn't know who he can trust. He doesn't know what roles everyone should be in. He's got so many new players on this team, and look, this is kind of the way it is in the NIL era. But he's got so many new players on this team. He's got so many young players on this team. He doesn't know who he can trust and where he can put them. The only person that he truly probably has a known role for, is Josh Hubbard. That's it. He's the only one that they kind of know what they're expecting and know what they can get from night in and night out at this point. And Hubbard had a really good game. He was 8 of 17 from the field, 4 of 10 from 3-point range, had 25 points. That's what you want. And the team, if you look at the stats, they shot around 50% from the field. They shot like around 40% from 3-point range. That makes those things look good. The problem is they had 26 turnovers. And I think 15 of them came in the first half. And the first half was the one that was just absolutely terrible. Mississippi State was up by 1 point right around the halfway point of the first half. And in the last 10 minutes of the first half, Iowa State just ran away from them, and Mississippi State never could catch back up. So, look, like I said, I think this team will eventually be okay, but it's going to take some time for everybody to figure out what their role is on this team. It's going to take some time for everyone to figure out how they can best contribute and what they're supposed to be doing. And what for Chris Jans, just to figure out what his rotations are and what his lineup should actually be. It didn't help that Jaden Epps missed the game, and he did not travel with the team because he was in the concussion protocol. That didn't help. And I think it's one of the reasons why they had so many turnovers, because you just didn't have quite a solid guard play back there. Now, Jaden Epps didn't play much in the first game because he probably suffered that concussion in that first game. But it's concerning the fact that they were just completely out of sorts throughout the course of that game on Monday night when they were playing at Iowa State. look, the only thing that really concerns me about this, well, in terms of big picture, I'll say the only thing that concerns me in terms of the big picture aspect of Mississippi State, when teams can't do, or teams aren't doing the things that are like linchpins for a coach, when they can't do those things well, that's always a concern for me. I think back to 2012, the year that Rick Stansbury ended up getting fired as the Mississippi State head coach his final season. If you think back to that team, and I was 13 years ago, it's been a while, but if you think back to that team was really, really talented, and they got off to such a great start, and they looked like they were going to be challenging. They looked like they were going to challenge for an SEC title. It looked like they were going to, have a chance to make a potential deep run in the NCAA tournament. Everything was lining up, but the problem was, one, they had Sydney. Renardo Sydney was one of the biggest problems, but the other issue, when you looked at that team was terrible defensively. Absolutely terrible defensively. People could kind of score at will against Mississippi State, and the only reason they missed shots is because they just didn't line them up correctly. It wasn't because Mississippi State put pressure on them, and that was always a hallmark of any Rick Stansbury team from the time that he took over after the 1997 season. Back in 1998, when he took over, that team got after you defensively and always hounded you and always made you work for every basket that you got. And in 2012, that wasn't happening. Teams just scored at will against Mississippi State. And that is a thing that is concerning about what we saw on Monday night from the basketball team. Is Iowa State was pretty much able to do whatever they wanted to. They were able to completely disrupt Mississippi State's offense. That's the reason they scored. They forced 25 turnovers or 26 turnovers. They scored like 94 points or something like that. These are things that just didn't happen in those first 2 years of the Chris Jans era. Last year, they lost a lot defensively, and Chris Jans knew that, and he said that he was getting some guys to come in and be that defensive force that he is so accustomed to. And the second game of the year, you looked absolutely pathetic defensively. I mean, a part of it is when you turn the ball over 25 times or 26 times, when you turn the ball over that much, other teams are going to have a lot of scoring opportunities and they're going to get easy baskets. But even when they weren't in the half court, or they weren't in transition trying to make something happen off of a turnover, Iowa State was able to score pretty much whenever they wanted to and do pretty much whatever they wanted on the offensive end. So that is a big concern coming out of this game. Is we thought, at least Chris Jans thought, he had got the guys in that were going to make a huge difference in terms of being just that tenacious, giving that tenacious defense that we saw those first 2 years, and what really carried them into the NCAA tournament during his first 2 years. We thought we were getting that back this year, and that's not what we got at all on Monday night. Now, like I said, it is early. It's, Iowa State is probably going to be one of the best teams in the country. They were expected to be. They were ranked 16th in the AP poll coming into this game. So they're supposed to be really good. So it's not, you can't just freak out too much, but you were hoping for a much better showing from the Bulldogs, and they just did not give it to us. So, all right, let's make a transition to the NBA. I am a Memphis Grizzlies fan. I live just south of Memphis in DeSoto County, Mississippi. And ever since the Grizzlies came, I didn't start becoming a Grizzlies fan. I slowly became a Grizzlies fan after they made their move from Vancouver, and I've adopted them completely within the last 15, 20 years, however long it's been. They've been my ride or die. The Grizzlies, they've got issues. They are now 4-8 on the year. They ended up losing to the New York Knicks last night. I don't remember what the score was, but it was not pretty. Ja Morant does not look like Ja Morant. I mean, this is the frustrating part about Ja Morant. They got lucky. They ended up not getting the first overall pick, in which they didn't get Zion Williamson that year. And they ended up getting Ja Morant, who was easily the second pick. And Zion Williamson is, I think I'm doing the name correct. I can't remember his last name. But Ja was easily supposed to be the second pick. And they looked up because Zion has been hurt pretty much the entire time that he has been playing in the NBA. And Ja Morant has been just one of the absolute biggest and brightest stars in the NBA. Now, the problem is the last couple of years have not been so great for John Morant. He had all the issues with him flashing the guns on social media, getting suspended for huge chunks of the season. It ended up just completely derailing their season 2 years ago. And then once when he finally came back, he ended up getting hurt, and it just completely derailed that season. Last year, they started off really well. They got off to a great start, and then it just kind of fell apart for them. They ended up making the playoffs, but they ended up going in as the 8th seed, and it was bad. It was just altogether bad. They just did not play well. They were really bad defensively, and that's one of the things that, again, is this team is such a different team than what they were during the grit and grind era, where they just completely grinded you down defensively and just made you wish you never played the sport of basketball during the grit and grind era. And now they are this fast-paced, high-scoring offense that, unfortunately, they can't stop anybody, and that's one of the reasons why they are playing so poorly at this point. John Morant has not been who he has been. And one of the issues also is they are just absolutely riddled with injuries. They've got to get healthy. They don't have Scottie Pippen Jr. They don't have Zach Edney. They're getting Brandon Clark back, hopefully. No, they're getting Zach Edney back, hopefully soon. And Zach Edey, I keep saying Edney. And they're getting him back, hopefully soon. But Brandon Clark isn't coming back probably for another 4 to 5 weeks if I heard correctly. So this is one of the biggest problems that the Grizzlies have right now, is they are injured. John Morant is not playing well. You've got just so many issues, and I'll be honest, I don't know why they hired the guy. I cannot pronounce the coach's name. It's a weird European name. I can't pronounce it, but they made him the interim after they fired their coach last year, and I thought that was fine. The problem was I never thought that guy should have been just the de facto, let's put him in as the head coach. And that's what they ended up doing. And I just don't get it. I don't get why what they saw in that playoff run, which they ended up just getting absolutely blasted by the Oklahoma City Thunder, and what few games that he coached down the stretch at the very end of the season. I just don't understand what it was that they saw in him that said that, yeah, he's the guy, he's the one that we need to turn this team over to. Because a few years ago, the Grizzlies were the number 2 seed. They had one of the youngest teams in the NBA. They had this incredible nucleus of players with John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane. And you thought this team was set up to be one of the elites for like the next decade. But all of a sudden now they're scrapping just to try to find a win. So the front office has really screwed up a lot here recently. They really have, and they've got to kind of get their act together. I think they really screwed up with the coaching hire. I'll be interested to see if they don't turn this around. I'll be interested to see if they decide to keep him for another year, because I just don't see. I don't think the players respect him. I don't think they trust him, and I would like to see what they end up doing with if they had a different coach. Now, like I said, they could turn it around. It's still early, and it's only 12 games into an 82 game season, so they could turn this thing around, but it doesn't look good right now. Maybe when they get healthy, maybe things will start to look better, but right now it looks pretty bleak as a Memphis Grizzlies fan if you're sitting there watching that team and wondering what's going on. So, all right, real quick, I want to talk about a show that has been out for over 30 years, and I'm just now catching up to it. That is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Buffy the Vampire Slayer came out and started in 1997. It ran for 7 seasons. I am watching it for the first time, and the reason I'm watching it for the first time is because Hulu is, I guess, rebooting the series with a brand new Slayer. They're bringing in, if you saw the Star Wars show, I can't remember what the name of that show was, but if you saw it last year, it had Jude Law in it. And if you saw that show, one of the lead girls in that show is taking over as a Slayer. Now, it should be interesting because she will actually be like 16 years old when Sarah Michelle Gellar was supposed to be like 16 years old, and she was actually like 20 years old playing that. So it's going to be an actually more age appropriate character. But this girl is taking over the Slayer, and Sarah Michelle Gellar's Buffy is going to be the one who's supposed to be like mentoring her and tutoring her as the Slayer. So I wanted to watch this because I knew it was going to be actually pick up. My guess is they will do a pretty good job of, whenever this releases in 2026, they'll do a pretty good job of making it where you don't have to have seen all 7 seasons. They'll fill in any information that you might need prior to having watched this that they might pull from the previous series. But I've been interested in it just because if you were to like do a Google search for best television shows of all time and you like pull up like at the top 100 list, you're going to find Buffy the Vampire Slayer on just about every single one of those shows, on every single one of those lists. And it's normally going to be around the 30 to 50 range. Somewhere in that range is where you're going to find it. And so it just, when it was actually out, it just never really appealed to me. I didn't think it was something that I would want to watch. It was a low budget, you know, kind of teen drama that was on the WB of all things. And I was like, I just don't know that I really care to watch it. But everybody who watched it raved about it. And so now I'm getting caught up. And look, it's a little bit of a tough watch at certain points because, like I said, it was on the WB. It was very, very low budget. It's very hokey at times. That's kind of the point of it. It's trying to be hokey. But if you can kind of get past the visual aesthetic of it, because like I said, there's some really bad special effects. There's some really bad costumes, creature costumes and things like that on it. If you get past that, it is a really good show, and it does a really good job of just showing these characters who were in the middle of a time when we were transitioning pretty quick and pretty fast in a lot of areas. I mean, you think back to the late 90s, early 2000s, this is when the internet was kind of taking over the world. The internet had been around for a while, but this is when we were starting to do a lot of things through the internet. You know, people were starting to take classes online for the first time. People were starting, remote work was in its very, very, very infancy, but people were finding ways to actually, work from home. And these were things that you couldn't do before the internet, and all this stuff was starting to change. You also started to have the idea, this show, it's what they would say is queer coded in the fact that no, Buffy is not gay in this, but the fact that she is hiding the fact that she is the Slayer from her mother, from the people in her lives, and she has to like come out to them and tell them at certain points throughout the course of the show. That's reflected in society as society was becoming much more okay and much more willing to accept the gay community, as we've continued to do so throughout the course of our history these last 25 years. But you start to see that a little bit in this show. So like I said, these were big transitions that were taking place in society, and you kind of can see it in Buffy the Vampire Slayer as well. You can kind of see it in the show. And one of the things I do like about the show is, if you're an MCU fan, if you're a fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you really need to go watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because Joss Whedon is the creator of that show. And he had such a huge influence on the early versions, the early portions of the MCU. I know obviously he wrote and directed the first 2 Avengers movie, the first Avengers and Avengers Ultron. But I think he also had a lot of influence on the writing of some of the other films that were taking place during that time, because if you think about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and just how quippy and how they just toss the one-liners out constantly when they're fighting and stuff like that, you see that so much throughout the course of Buffy. Whenever she's fighting a demon and whenever she's fighting a vampire, she's tossing out these one-liners left and right, especially in the early going of the show. It doesn't happen quite as much. I'm in the middle of season 6 right now. But like I said, you can see the influence that Joss Whedon had on the MCU and how it's affected the MCU ever since, he started, because that's, one of the things that people loved about it. They loved that quippiness. They loved the fact that that there was that humor that was worked into it, and it was written and done very, very well. So I've really enjoyed the show. Like I said, I think it's really good. It is, if you haven't watched it and you plan to possibly go down and, revisit it, let me go ahead and give you some advice. The first season is not great. I'm a little surprised that it got renewed. It just kind of shows that the WB felt like they had something with the show after that first season, regardless of the fact that it didn't do well in terms of ratings and in terms of reviews. It did not do well after that first season. It's a shorter season. It's only 14 episodes long, if I remember correctly. And that one's a little bit rough. And that the first episode of season 2 is not so great either, but it really picks up steam after into season 2. Season 3 is just absolutely phenomenal. I thought it's the best one I've seen so far. Season 4 and season 5 are really good. Season 4 is hit or miss. They've got some weird episodes in there. Season 5, they introduced a new character that a lot of people didn't like at the time, I've discovered, and I can kind of see why, but I think the story of it works really, really well for what they did in season 5. And season 6 has been very interesting and very good so far, but obviously I'm not completely done with it, and we'll just see what the final season was actually like. But like I said, if you're interested in it, I would highly recommend going and checking it out. So, all right, last thing we'll talk about is a local issue here in DeSoto County. Look, you probably heard about this if you live in DeSoto County. If you live in Mississippi, you may have even heard about this. There was a case where a local youth pastor for Get Well Church in Hernando ended up grooming one of the youth members that she was responsible for. She groomed this. I think the girl was like 14 or 15 years old when this started. And she spent years doing this, and she ended up getting caught because eventually the person she was grooming, the person that she had tried to start a relationship with, realized what was happening to her, and she came clean to her parents. She told her parents what happened, and they went to the church, and she ends up getting arrested. The reason why this thing is taking on a life of its own is because the judge in the case sentenced Lindsay Whiteside to, I think, 3 years of house arrest and like 2 years of probation or something like that, instead of actually putting her in prison and not giving her the maximum sentence, which is what DA Matthew Barton was hoping for. So that's one of the reasons why this thing has been just taking on a life of its own. The other reason why, though, is because one of the members of the DeSoto County School Board, Michelle Henley, who was actually the president of the school board at the time, wrote a letter to a character reference, basically, for Lindsay Whiteside to try to influence the sentencing that she got. Matthew Barton was aware of this, so he subpoenaed her to come in and testify and tried to find out what it is that made her actually decide to do that. Why are you, a person on the school board, taking up and writing a character letter for a person who committed sexual assault on a child? Because it just shouldn't make sense. And so he brought her in. He made her, he asked her if you wanted to recant your statement. She said, no, I don't want to recant. And that's one reason why it's blown up. Another reason why is one of the teachers at Lewisburg Intermediate School, and I live right next door to Lewisburg High School and Lewisburg Intermediate, is one of those teachers. She didn't write a letter, but she actually came to the sentencing hearing and testified and basically made it sound like it was the victim's fault. And so this has been another reason why it's blown up. Look, I'm not going to get into too much of the specifics. The teacher who showed up at the sentencing hearing, she has been relieved of her duties. It took time, which people didn't like, but unfortunately, guys, this stuff takes time. It's just the way it is. But there's a lot of people who are irate about this, and they completely should be. There's no reason why Michelle Henley should have written that letter. Michelle Henley has refused to resign from the DeSoto County School Board of Education. I don't know what it is or what has possessed her to think that it's a good idea for her to stay on the board. Every single time that they have a school board meeting, she is a distraction, and she is causing problems just by her being there, because people are irate and they don't trust her anymore, and they want her gone. And unfortunately, the school board can't get rid of her. The only thing they could do is they removed her as the president of the board, and she is no longer the president. But the only thing I want to caution the rest of the people in DeSoto County of, people are mad as heck about the schools and the school board and the way that they have handled this. And I understand it and I get that, but they're wanting to, there's a lot of people are like, we got to bring this school board. We got to bring these schools down. We got to take these schools out. Look, I don't care what your thoughts on public schools are in general, but you want a good public school system in your area. You want to be in an area with a good public school, even if you don't use the public school, because a big part of what makes home values go up, what makes property values stay high, the reason why you have thriving communities often is because the schools are really good. You don't have thriving communities in areas that have schools that perform poorly. You just don't. If you're getting ready to buy a house and it says such and such such and such school zone on it, you know it's a good school because they're using that as a selling point. And that's very much the case where we are in DeSoto County, especially if you're in Lewisburg, if you're in DeSoto Central, if you're in Center Hill, if you're in Hernando, they put those on there. DeSoto County schools have done remarkably well, and they do an incredible job of educating their students. Doesn't matter if they are the top schools like those four that I just mentioned, or if you're one of the Title I schools like Lake Cormorant, like Horn Lake, like South Haven, like Olive Branch. Those schools still do really well too, and that's a testament to just how well these schools of DeSoto County are. If you go to if you were to go to a school zone, go to a school district that has half of their schools as a Title I school, and if you were to go to that school district, it's probably not going to, you're at best going to have them as rated as a B school district at best. DeSoto County, despite the fact they have half their schools made up of Title I schools, has been an A district for like the last 10 to 15 years. I can't remember exactly how long, but it's been a while. And that's a testament to how good they are. We want the schools to do well. Look, we have problems in the DeSoto County schools. Don't get me wrong. I understand that. I get that. You're looking at a former DeSoto County school teacher. I know that there are obviously issues and they're not perfect and they've got things they got to work out, but they are the largest school district in the state of Mississippi. And unfortunately they have had issues where they need to get people like this out of their schools. And another issue is they had nine teachers wrote letters of support for this girl plus an assistant principal. Now we don't know who they are because the records have been sealed and those letters have been sealed as well, but we don't know who they are at this point. But look, we need our schools to be good. And there was this a couple of weeks ago, a lot of parents said we're going to hold our kids out because we want to hit the school in the pocketbook. Well, that doesn't work anymore. They don't do ADA anymore. Funding used to come from average daily attendance. So that wasn't going to affect their money anymore because we don't do that. Now it's based on enrollment. But I get you wanting, I understand wanting the school board to take you seriously, and I understand you wanting to make the school board try to reckon with the fact that they have these teachers who are willing to write these letters of support in your schools. You want them to reckon with that. But I don't get this idea of, because that's one of the things I keep hearing. Let's hit them in their funding. Let's hit them where it hurts. The school's not going to be able to protect. One of the things is when they say that, they say we don't trust them to protect our children. I can promise you this: if you take their funding away, if you make less financial resources available to the schools, they're not going to be able to keep your children safe. They're just not. Look, I understand the outrage and I get it. And I hate the fact that this has happened. And we should be outraged, but trying to hurt the school system isn't going to make the school system better. Like I said, we need our schools to be good. We need our schools to be solid. If they're not, then DeSoto County is going to struggle. It really is. That's just a fact of life. One of the reasons why DeSoto County has prospered so much for the last 40 years is because of the fact that their schools have been fantastic. They just really have. They've been absolutely fantastic. And it's the backbone of what DeSoto County has been and probably will be for the years to come. So, like I said, I get the outrage. I understand where everybody's coming from. Like I said, I'm right there with you, but let's not drag our teachers down with this, because that's one of the things that I've really hated seeing is people are just assuming, like, if you're a teacher in DeSoto County now, you must be a pedophile because of the fact that people support them. Look, it's hard enough being a teacher now. A lot of teachers don't want to do it anymore. Like I said, if you're watching this on YouTube or TikTok, you're looking at a teacher who got tired of the crap and decided to get out of it. It's hard to find teachers nowadays. I remember when I was trying to get a job in DeSoto County, it was almost impossible to even get an interview in DeSoto County. Now, almost every single school goes into the school year with teacher openings and just trying to find somebody to fill those jobs because nobody wants to do it anymore. We need just because I know we're angry about this and I know we're upset about it, and I get that, and I'm right there with you, but we need to figure out what we can do to help them, not completely tear them down. And what we've been doing, and this idea, focusing our outrage on everybody who's not responsible for what has happened, and just shooting this wide shot across the entire school district, it's not going to help because it's going to people just don't want to deal with it anymore. And teachers have been really good. I haven't seen one teacher, I got a lot of teacher friends. I haven't seen them post anything on social media about this because I'm sure they're trying to keep their mouth shut. But I know that has to be eating at them. I know it has to just be eating them up, that, they're taking so many strays for this, and they didn't do anything. They're just trying to go to school every single day, do their job. And they've got people criticizing just the entirety of the teachers in DeSoto County schools because of the fact that they are a teacher there and this stuff happens. So anyway, guys, I appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed this show, and I hope you continue to follow. And until next time, we'll see you then.